Last tutorial for the Princess Mononoke cosplay. Check out the first two if you haven't. This one's about her little knife and her big mask. For the knife I used some air drying clay to make the handle. Just rolled the piece to fit in my hand. Then using that as a reference point, I draw on thin foam a triangle the size I want it to be and duplicate that. I also cut a small rectangular piece for the base of the handle and glued it on using hot glue. I cut a thin strip of the leftover white linen fabric from her costume and glued it on around the handle. Then I glued together the triangles along their long sides and in between their bottoms the top edge of the handle. Then with a cutter I scraped the foam surfaces to give it some texture, sealed with craft glue, and later painted the handle and these points on the knife red. The rest of the knife using grey, but afterwards some white in the center for dimension. The mask! I could literally not come up with a more complicated method. There are easier ways, but I like making my life difficult. I used the sphere pattern from Kamui Cosplay to cut 4 pieces of foam. Mine was too thin, so I cut 8 and glued them in pairs on top of each other. Then using the specific markings the pattern contains, I glued the pieces with each other, thus creating the half sphere. Using a glass I also marked where the eyes and mouth holes should be and cut out the eyes only. I used the wrong kind of glue for this, so my mask looked pointy at places. To cover that, I used plaster gauze in thin strips. You dip each strip briefly into water and then using your fingers smooth it out on the surface you want to cover. After it was dry, it looked like this. The surface now though has too much texture, so then with air drying clay rolled out in very thin layers I covered the whole mask. For the connecting points, I smoothed the clay out as much as possible with my fingers. For the ears, I cut out cardboard in this shape, so when you glue it like this, it has a curve, and built some clay around the edges to make it nicer. With thick rolls of clay, I built up the circles around the eyes and mouth. I smoothed the edges a bit along the surface of the mask, but tried to keep the hoops as prominent as possible. After the clay was dry, I gave the whole surface a good sanding. I sketched where the lines should be and created them with thin rolls of clay. Glued back the edges and mouth that fell during the sanding process and then painted it. The base should be red and the hoops yellow. I wanted to give more dimension and texture, so with black I painted in some cracks that formed from the clay and with a ripped up sponge tapped lightly dark red and brown all around the mask. I also splattered with a brush some watered out black paint. For the ears, I just painted the inside and the back of them with dark red and the edges with brighter red. Finally, for the fur around the mask, I used a piece of fake white fur and glued it along the upper half of the mask, in the inside of course. For the ears, I cut 2 slits on the fur, folded the cardboard paper on the bottom in the back side of the fabric and glued them into place. Phew! That was it. Believe me, I tried to make the video as simple as possible. Thank you for watching and don't forget to protect the forest.